All right, hey everybody, welcome to a special live edition of the Multiple Myeloma Patient Connect podcast. In conjunction with Patient Connect and Multiple Myeloma Warriors, one of the largest and most engaged certainly the most engaged multiple myeloma patient communities in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about clinical trials, and we're joined by Peter Rivkees, a longtime friend and patient advocate from Florida, who recently participated, is part of a phase one clinical trial, and he's really here to share his story, his fears, his breakthroughs, and what it really means to be part of a trial. So, with that, Peter, do you want to introduce yourself and we can get going?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, News, for putting this together. I think for the multiple myeloma community, the more information that we can share, and for me, the more connected we can feel as a community is really critical out there because we never know who's got the right answer or who's got an answer or who can help you and support you. So that's what we're all about, is supporting each other in a way that makes sense for each one of us out there. And I firmly believe that, we all are here because we all want to help and support each other. So I would offer to anybody that if anybody has any questions offline after our conversation today, please reach out to me, truly, or anybody else that, it's within the community, that Polygon has put together and that with Alan's help, has put together an amazing community out there with a lot of stories. And, one of the stories that, as part of my journey, my clinical trial, came from the Warrior website. And as Lori may know, there was patient number one at Moffitt, where we were involved in the clinical trial. They had a different outcome than myself and other people that went through the trial out there. But so, um, I
So,
was diagnosed in
yeah,
primary.
why don't we just start with, what made you say yes to joining a clinical trial
Yeah,
to
so
begin with?
so I have it all right in front of me here. So the yes part, right? So I was through five lines of treatment, starting off in 2019. Went through a stem cell transplant at UF Shands in August 2019. Got about 12 to 14 months out of that. Was on four more lines of treatment, and then I went for my first CAR T that was not a clinical trial at Moffitt in 2022, and that didn't work. And then I was back on another line of treatment, and I have a T1114 translocation. So that's only 20% of the myeloma population out there. And I was on a medication called Venclexa, and that gave me about another 12 months. And then it was time to like, okay, so why is a line of treatment not working for you long term? Went to my primary physician over at Moffitt, Dr. Boz, who's amazing. And Dr. Boz said to me, we've got two options. We can try another line of treatment that may or may not be successful, or you can try a clinical phase one trial that again may or not be successful, but the results that we're getting so far have been just amazing results, truly. So what decided, for me was a couple things. One was that I had complete faith and trust in my medical team that they knew it was best for me. I'm not the expert on treating disease. I'm the expert of dealing with the disease, but not the expert on treating it and knowing what's out there. The other part of it was that I'm also involved in research study with Moffitt with my treatment, and they always draw extra vials. I'm not sure if anyone else is involved in some research studies out there, but it's also my way of giving back too, that my information that would be gathered from the clinical trial could be helpful to other folks out there with multiple myeloma as well. So, there's kind of an altruistic, side of it also. But the other side of it was, holy crap, I've got a chance here to try a clinical trial that could really be beneficial for me. So backing up to my first CAR T, that was only approved 5 weeks prior to me getting it by the FDA. So it was also sort of brand new, but it went through phase 1 through 5. So if you understand, the phases in clinical trials out there, it first starts sometimes, with animals, and then it goes to phase 1. And part of for phase 1 is a dosing trial. So, part of my journey dealing with multiple myeloma was just trying to find the best treatment available for me. And Moffitt was just phenomenal in terms of me trusting them absolutely and completely. And the other part that was when Dr. Boz presented the clinical trial to me, the phase 1. It was a Bristol Myers clinical trial, which my first one was. I happen to know Bristol Myers, the companies, through other work I was going through in my past work experience, and I trust them as a company. And when I was thinking about the overall decision, so what was the final deciding point? I think it had to do with understanding that Dr. Boz put me in great hands with another doctor there, Dr. Hansen, who was in charge of the clinical trial. Met with Dr. Hansen again, trust is building and building. And then from that point, went through a patient advocacy program they have there, Care Navigator. You sit down with them for about 2 hours. They go through the entire process with you, again, building comfort with the clinical trial all along the way. So my comfort kept building and building and building. And it was just the right thing at the right time, and it made sense for me to do it. And I am pretty good at doing research online. So I found out that there were five other, or I think there are eight other hospitals doing it. Really, leaders in their field out there in terms of cancer care out there. I'm not sure which ones they were exactly at this point. That's my brain not kicking in with chemo brain, but it's just that there were other great institutions doing it. Hopkins, I think, it was on Mass General, maybe Dana-Farber, and if they're all doing it, then there's got to be something in terms of validity to the clinical trial moving forward. So when I looked at that, it was really just something that my primary doctor at Moffitt said, this is what we think is best for you, having trust. Moving on to the next phase was going on to the clinical trial or doctor at Moffitt, meeting with patient advocacy, understanding that I was just in great care. And really, honestly, just having complete confidence in my medical team, especially in the phase 1, because you don't really know what happens in the phase 1. So trust and communication, I think, were really the two biggest factors that got me into the trial.
Thanks, Peter. And, was there any moment where you almost thought, no, I can't? Or how did your family think? And, what really tipped the scale? It seems like it was the trust factor in your physician.
Yeah, I mean, when I read that just tragic story of that other member, within the Warrior site, yes, you have some doubt, like, all right, are they going to get the dosing right for me? Because I was the third one at Moffitt, and I think the 40th patient overall between all the trials out there. And again, it had to come to trust, right? And without the trust factor, it just would not have happened. And I was kind of on a dual path at that point in time where my clinical trial was supposed to start, I think, on February 20th. And unfortunately, they diagnosed a fractured C5 and a tumor around my 4, 5, and 6. And we were kind of figuring out with the sponsor. And this is another thing also, because the sponsor was very involved in my decision process of whether my C5 corpectomy would impact my clinical trial. And the communication between Moffitt and Bristol Myers also helped build my confidence as well. So, when you look at communication is one of the biggest keys to anything that we go through as myeloma patients out there, with ourselves, with our physicians, and also with family members and friends.
Beautiful. And so it sounds like you got a lot of support between Moffitt and your physicians. What were you expecting? Like, what really surprised you? And like, if you could talk a little bit about the process and navigating all this.
It's really just the amount of data news. When you get the clearance paperwork from Bristol Myers Juno, it's like 78 pages, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff in there that could basically tell you what could go wrong, right? You're not thinking about the good part that says this is what the good outcome can be. Sort of like when I went in for my C5 surgery, the surgeon tells you that 90% of all cases works out well, right? Unfortunately, I focus on the 10% of like, all right, what happens if kind of thing. So when you look at, the patient navigator, it was a nurse practitioner as well as a person that worked directly for Dr. Hansen. They probably spent 2 hours with me going through everything, including what the sponsors, involvement would be, as well as Moffitt's involvement would be, and their communication back and forth. And the good thing is that all of these clinical trial sites, they talk to each other. So the data input and the information you get from everybody. So it's sort of like when they're presenting a case. You're not just presenting the case within Moffitt, you're presenting the case to every other, clinical trial site out there and sharing information. And I think that there's a lot more information sharing in that kind of circumstance than if you're just going through your regular, Velcade, Cytoxin, Dex, kind of protocol.
Very good. So, in terms of like your biggest fear going into the trial or like, generally patients having a fear about clinical trials, like feeling like possibly, this is very experimental or feeling like, we're going to be a guinea pig in this, experiment. How can you maybe speak to that fear that people might have about clinical trials?
So there's always fear with a clinical trial because it's a clinical trial. It's not proven. It's not, sanctioned or approved by the FDA yet out there. So there's a risk, right? So you look at the risk reward, kind of relationship between it all. So the first things were like, based on, what I read in one of some of the groups out there, the side effects. Okay. So obviously death could be a side effect, right? Because one of the side effects is a CRS, the cytokine release storm out there, which could lead to a very elevated temperature. And with the dosing trial, they don't really know at that point what the exact protocol is to get the temperature down, to get whatever infections are going down, whatever is going on in there. So that's one part of it. The other part was, so that's like the me side of it. The other side is like my family side. What is it going to do to my family to put them through a clinical trial where you're not going to know the outcome, right? So we've had some very serious conversations with my wife and my kids about what if kind of things, right? So that's where it's important that everybody should have a living will. Everybody should have medical directives and everybody should have power of attorney. There's no question about that. You need to really have those as we go through what we go through with our treatment out there. And I think that other fears really involve financial part also, right? When people are in financial distress, you make decisions that sometimes are not rational or you don't use the intellectual side of your brain on it. You're using more the emotional side. Luckily, financially, we were fine with that. Other people that go through it, if they can't, be out of work for 2 months, it's financial hardship, right? Other fears, typically come down to like side effects. So some of the side effects that they mention, Lorraine knows about these side effects too. Um, from your side of things over there, the two biggest ones that they really talked about were skin rashes and skin peeling kind of things, or losing your fingernails. Those are the two that, so I lost all of my fingernails. They all came back though. It's really kind of strange though, because the fingernails, not to get too like gross and descriptive here, but they were growing underneath and the top layer was coming off. So that was a concern. I didn't want to lose my fingernails or start, having my skin peeling. And beyond that, it was really about the biggest fear truly was how do they know to handle something in a clinical trial, phase 1, that has not been worked on before? Okay. So when I was first given my cells back, The first night I had a CRS, the cytokine release storm. There was a pretty significant one. And this where it goes back into where communication is key again. So from the time that I told my nurse what was going on, that I felt warm, took my temperature was close to 103. From the time that she relayed that to the nurse practitioner that was on call, to the time that she called it in to my attending, within 10 minutes, they had stuff in me trying to resolve it. So that goes into the trust factor that you've really got amazing physicians working on your case. So I think the other fears involved, just from an internal standpoint, is like, holy crap, right? This is my 14th line of treatment in 6 years. It's like, how many more of these can my body withstand? The mental part I'm okay with, but it's just like physically, how much can you put your body through? So yes, absolutely fears, when it comes to personal things about how they can deal with, any kind of adverse situation that comes up, because this is what the trial's all about, right? So you're building cases and data points, as you go forward with each patient out there, and you're building a repository of data like, okay, so this worked for Peter in Moffitt and Tampa. So how's this going to work for Newsop and Mass General, right? And that all gets pulled together in there. And I was critical for 2 nights, I'll be open about sharing that. But they use some techniques and procedures that they have never worked on or actually put into practice with other myeloma patients going through CAR T. And they were just like the dream team. I can't describe them any other way. They really saved my life. They truly did. And now, I'll give you the end result now. I just got news last Thursday that they consider me in remission right now, which is great.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. So it's
Amazing.
amazing. So the only way to really tell is I have a bone marrow biopsy scheduled, I think, in 3 weeks. So they'll really know when we get to that MRD point, the minimal residual disease. But right now, I'm really doing really well with the treatment. So they got the right dosing right. They got the right way to intervene, which was just amazing to me how they did that. And I'm happy to say, like I said, that we know it's incurable, but I'll take the word remission.
Excellent, excellent. Great news. Yeah, and I mean these clinical trials are done at centers of excellence, right, across the country.
Truly.
So they have protocols where, people who are maybe not doing so well, can be done better and whatever the protocols for that are, like Moffitt. But these are major research centers and they can handle cases at the highest level, right?
Exactly. And Moffitt, I think, at any given point in time, has over 300 clinical trials in process. And Dr. who is the CEO and president of Moffitt, actually worked with I think his name was Dr. Feinberg at, it wasn't the NIH, but maybe, I forget the name of the institution, but Doctor Who was very much involved in immunotherapy going back 20, 25 years ago. And actually, he came for a visit also when I was in the hospital to kind of say hi and was sharing with me his thoughts on the new clinical trial as well. And, that gave me another level of confidence too that when you have someone so senior coming down and talking to you, it really is really just a nice experience. And I think I think he was explaining to me, was one of the first physicians to actually minister CAR T in a hospital setting. So again, building to the confidence and trust factor going into a phase one.
Very good, very good. Ken asked in the chat about, the fear around being a part of a placebo group, and we talked about this.
Yeah,
We've
good,
addressed
good.
this as
There are
well.
no placebos in cancer clinical one phase trials.
Yeah, I think that's a big myth we should bust.
Yeah, that is actually that can go on Mythbusters. There is no placebo. You have got to be treated what the protocol is. And mine was a dual target. So mine was a BCMA and I can never remember it, GPRC5D, I think it was the other one. So the first clinical trial or CAR T I went through was a BECMA, Bristol Myers. So this one basically attacks the cancer cells from two different directions. So basically, the CAR T when they genetically modify the T cells, it's sort of like they put in like these GPS tracers on the actual cell itself, which to me is just amazing how this works. So this way, my cancer cells were attacked from two different ways versus one the first time. And basically, it allows the cell to sort of open up and let the T cells that are modified in there to kill the cancer cells. Amazing technology when you think about it. But yes, there are no placebos in clinical trials, Ken.
Excellent. So you do receive the standard of care.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Fiona, for that. Um, so what would you tell somebody who's on the fence, Peter, about after hearing all this, um, the myths and the stigmas, um, just yeah, what would you tell somebody who's really on the fence?
I think it's really about talking to your medical team and your family that's supporting you around you to make sure, number one, you got family support. Because without family support, and if you're going through this, alone, not a good thing to go through. The other side of it is really just communicating all of your fears, all of your questions. There are no bad questions when you're talking about a clinical trial. When they spend 2 hours with you, you've got a good opportunity and that first time to go through all the questions that you have out there. And then there's opportunities for follow up after follow up to ask any questions you have. I will share with you that, through the portal and emailing directly with the clinical team, Dr. Hansen's team, that was running the clinical trial, they were great. Text me, call me as much as you want. I would get phone calls, on the weekend from Dr. Hansen checking in on me. She was at a conference in Hawaii and heard I had a bad night and wanted to check in on me. So the level of care you get is just phenomenal. And Moffitt, I'm not sure where you guys are treated, how big your CAR T floors are, but there is only 11 rooms in the CAR T wing over at Moffitt. So you get amazingly, strong personal care over there. I think that when you look at the overall experience, so all right, you see your doctors for what, 5 minutes a day? Maybe, right? The PAs were phenomenal. The nursing staff was phenomenal. The level of care and true care. I mean, it's not like, the nurses were like pretending to really care for your comfort and what you were going through. They know what you're going through, because the CAR T floor nurses are very special people. They, along with the other cancer wards over there, but they are really very special group of people over there, News.
Very good. And last question around, before we get to Q&A, how has being part of the clinical trial really changed your cancer journey, your mindset, how you think about medicine, your hope in the future?
So I think the biggest thing is to know that there's always something out there. And we've talked about this before, News, that I'm really big believable hope guy, right? Not just hope, but believable hope. And I think that it's important to understand that a clinical trial does not mean that there aren't other forms or other procedures or treatments out there available for you. It just happened to be the one that's right for me at that time out there. When you look at how it changed me, it's like I truly believe that, when you look at all the clinical trials that are going on, that the regular population just doesn't know about. When you go on to, some of the sites attached to like Patient Connect and you go into the clinical trials, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of the clinical trials going on out there. So I think, the big takeaway for me from taking this is number one is that physicians really do care about your welfare, truly, right? It's really important to have supportive families we've talked about before. That's truly important for you. Understanding that a clinical trial is not the last, attempt, to get you into a remission or a better state of myeloma out there. And I think lastly, overall, it's really just about understanding truly that you are your own best advocate, right? And in terms of like trying to figure out, Like even with Patient Connect and Polygon, how you guys are trying to work on, getting clinical trial access out there. In an interesting conversation with Dr. Who, he was sharing with me that the most the misserved population out there is African Americans in lower socioeconomic communities out there. And that's something that Moffitt is really trying to put out there and get the information out, to different facilities out there. They don't even know that CAR T exists. They don't know that clinical trials exist. They don't know where to go. And then the biggest thing is like where the cost factor. So I can share with you that when I went through the CAR T the first time, that was approved by the FDA, the procedure alone was $970,000 just for the CAR T, right? Plus everything else, And then when you go into the clinical trial side, what's important for everyone to know is that the sponsor, they're amazing. So they take care of lodging for you before. So I had to go in for 4 days of chemo before I went in for my procedure. And then I went in the hospital, and the only thing they don't pay for is your spouse or whoever's with you while you're in getting the actual treatment. After that, though, the 3 weeks afterwards, the sponsor pays for complete lodging. They give you a meal allowance, believe it or not, of $150 a day per person, which I wish I could have used, but I didn't. And they take care of pretty much everything for you through a service that includes finding lodging for you. Just they make the process just so easy for you. It is, and I think it was called something concierge service, but it really was true service where they took care of everything for you, which was nice. Just to alleviate any kind of things that you think you might forget out there. They really took care of everything in a very seamless manner, which was really appreciated.
Excellent. And that does address, the cost factor. Amy asked a question here about does insurance pay for clinical trials? Talking about primary and secondary insurance. But I think you covered that right there, that the trial sponsor pays for it, right?
So they pay
Yeah,
for the trial related items, right? So the other items, like scans that I needed for just other conditions I came in with, that's all on you. I've got a whole bunch of spinal stuff going on. I've got a torn tendon, all those, X-rays and MRIs, that's all on you. Um, the cost factor, folks, from what the sponsor and they call it a sponsor, whoever the pharma company is doing it, they will give you a listing of and breakdown of everything that they cover. So there's no surprises at all, which is nice.
amazing. Thank you for that. And Fiona, feel free to jump in on any of these. Fiona is our partner, Massive Bio, representing them, and she has deep expertise on sort of the process and the how um, to really guide you through getting to a clinical trial. So, Fiona, do you want to say a few words on anything you've said so far, and then I'll proceed with the additional questions.
Yeah, I just first, Peter, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's amazing. I wish, more people would share, more people would learn, because as you said, there are places out there that they don't even know clinical trials exist. And really, patients are losing out, not having that option to participate if they choose to. But we're partnering with Polygon Health here, and we here at Massive Bio, we connect cancer patients to clinical trials. And the way we do that is using our own artificial intelligence-based technology. We sort through all of the available clinical trials that are currently going on now to identify those trials that patients are eligible for. And then we too offer that white glove concierge service. We want patients to have the best outcome. We want to not only provide them the information about the trial, um, but also help them to the enrollment. because many people, unfortunately, fall off. They get the information, but then maybe they're not sure what to do with it. Maybe their physicians are not sure what to do with it. So we want to support the patients throughout the entire journey to help them get access to and enroll into clinical trials. So again, thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're part of the Polygon family there. They're great people there, as you know. You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
that when you look at, the amount of clinical trials out there, it's overwhelming. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But with generative JI, with AI now, you can just type in like multiple myeloma, clinical trials, where they available, and it's amazing, whatever AI tool you use out there, it'll populate, a whole bunch of good stuff and information for you. One other thing that, we were talking about before is like, where did I find meaning in this whole process? So as a therapist, one of the books that I recommend to a lot of clients to read is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And one of the major three tenets of what he talks about is finding meaning through suffering. All right. So what I mentioned, I'm just going to read this right from here so I get it right. But finding meaning is accepting and confronting unavoidable suffering, recognizing that one's attitude towards suffering can give it purpose. So that is something that I think is really important to think about. That I don't really like the word suffering a lot, but it fit the book and the context that the book was written in. But it's really about understanding that through adversity, you can learn a lot about yourself and a lot about the people that support you, and certainly a lot about your medical team that's taking care of you. So I think that if you think about that sense of meaning you get from this, you do get a sense of meaning that's very personal from this, from the experience.
Excellent. I'm just reading through some of the questions here. We're doing great on time. Ken asked, did all the info come back through your primary oncologist for review?
Yeah, so basically, I get treated locally here through Florida Cancer Specialist. I get treated up at Moffitt through my primary Dr. Vaz, who's a multiple myeloma specialist, who hands it over to Dr. Hansen that handles the clinical trial. Everybody communicates with each other, Ken. Everyone shares their notes out there, so even here locally, at Florida Cancer Specialist, they get all my notes from everything from Moffitt. So I had to actually request all of my records from Moffitt for something else that I'm going through in the urine shut. 899 pages of notes. Um, they don't charge you for it either. They just send it to you in a file, which is kind of nice. But to answer your question, everybody talks to each other, and so they have rounds every morning while you're in the hospital. So basically, a nurse practitioner will come in. Typically, it was between like 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Then they go back and give their report to the treating physician attending. And then the attending will come in with a whole team of people, probably five or six people every morning, to share with you. All right, so this is what we know. This is what's going on. This is how your night was. They go through all of your numbers, and the communication was just truly exceptional.
Excellent. And then as a follow-up, Ken also asked about is info also provided to each doctor through venues like MyChart? So you don't have to.
Yeah, so basically, what you can do is, I have my chart. So what you can do is you can have your local physician send the release of information, HIPAA release, to Moffitt, and they'll send them over to whoever your physician is. It may not end up in my chart, but they'll end up in your records at your care physician locally.
Excellent. And then about funding, one other question, did you ever have a fear around losing funding while you're in the trial? You know?
No, so here's another important thing too. You can drop out of the trial anytime you want to while you're in it. All right. So if you're not feeling comfortable with the trial at any point in time, you can opt out of it. I was never in fear of Bristol Myers going under while I was in the trial. So, that's a good thing. So no, that was not a fear of the funding on it. Once they lock you in, they pretty much lock you in.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too. Um, we here at Massive Bio, we have matched thousands of patients to clinical trials. And, with the current climate in the US, people are concerned about funding. I can tell you what we see on a day-to-day is that existing funding hasn't been an issue. So, there's potential for an issue for maybe new things that could be coming up in the future. But, you know, on a day-to-day, we haven't experienced any issues with any patients or trials or sponsors reporting any funding cuts for ongoing trials, which is
Yeah,
good.
and that's an important thing too, because that gives you comfort knowing, right, that you're getting a continuation of care.
Right, right,
I think it's also important to let you know that my primary insurance, who happens to be Cigna, they were in touch with the sponsor also, trying to get the pre-authorizations for everything, right? This
sure,
is not like a call up 24 hours before and get pre-auth.
right.
This is done like weeks and weeks in advance to make sure that everything is spelled out. And the thing is, when you go through the clinical trial timeline, they'll share with you that, here's what's happening your first week. Here's what's happening your second week. They get a pre-auth. Here's what's happening your third week, fourth week, fifth week. So all your pre-authorizations, which quite honestly, as everyone here has probably had a bad experience, being on hold for 45 minutes with some bad music, the pre-authorizations are critically important to make sure that you get those done. And I will tell you that Moffitt did a great job, providing all the supporting paperwork. There was never an issue and never delay from my experience. It may have happened to other people, but for me, it was really a seamless, smooth, transactional kind of thing that really didn't impact me at all in the pre-authorization. But it's a critical thing to make sure that you get pre-authorization.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right. So we're doing excellent on time. I just wanted to give one last opportunity. I think we ran through the questions on the chat. But anybody else on the call, Amy, Lori, Marty, Livette, Deborah, anybody who has any questions or even just thoughts based on what you heard, um, happy to take them now. Otherwise, we can wrap.
Well, I can share with you a little bit like where I am now in treatment. Okay.
Please.
So they're still debating on the vaccinations. So I got my pneumonia and shingles 3 weeks ago. I get my next set of baby shots, I think, in another 3 weeks. What they're really considering now is doing the MMR, the live vaccine, after 1 year versus 2 years. With the measles going around, there's a lot of talk in the oncology world out there about whether they give myeloma patients and other patients that are immune compromised 1 year. So that may be something that is going to be still up for discussion. So that's important. So the only thing that I'm doing now, I've got my pill box with a whole bunch of pills that I take every day for my immune system kind of stuff. And then also I go in for IVIG Gamma Guard once a month. And that's really all that I'm doing now locally here. At Moffitt, the protocol, for the clinical trial, it's very structured. So you've got to go in, like I was just in last week for my 5 month checkup. I'll have a 6 month checkup. And then it might be after a year, you go to every 6 months for a checkup. And then part of this is that there's scheduled PET scans, scheduled bone marrow biopsies, scheduled just regular scans, spinal scans, because they want to know what the interaction is, between that and any other. I guess in terms of like your spinal structure, for me anyway, whether there's any degradation, from that you're not getting from the treatment versus if you had or had not had the treatment out there. So luckily, they have it really pretty well outlined for you. That you can't go wrong if you follow their 80-page, or 78-page report that they give you prior to signing up, because they will give you, again, almost day by day what's happening in the trial.
Excellent, excellent. Lavette, you can unmute yourself. You have a question.
Yes, I may have I got on late, so you may have addressed this, and if so, I do apologize. But with CAR T, is it the same that you have to be isolated for 100 days as it is with the stem cell transplant? Is that same, you know?
Now, so you have to be, well, nice to meet you, Livette. Welcome to the meeting today. So after my stem cell transplant, I unfortunately got C. diff my second day in the hospital. So I had a little bit of different situation where my immune system was like really wacky and out of control. And back then it was COVID days also, so it's very different, going through it, in February and March of this year, Livette. So you've got to be careful. Your immune system is absolutely compromised. There's no question about it. They do advise you to stay away from large crowds. Definitely Purell, wash your hands. If you're living in a household, with other family members, they've got to be careful also about when they come into the house. Make sure you wash your hands also. And still the same protocol takes place with that magical 100.4 number in temperature that, if you get an elevated temperature, they want you to go right to the ER. But in answer to your question, it's just about being careful and using common sense with it.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'll just give a few more seconds. If anybody else wants to unmute themselves and ask a question or give a comment on anything you've heard today, happy to have you do so. Great. Okay, Ken, go ahead. We can't hear you, Ken. No, we can't hear you, right? Peter, you can't hear him, can you?
No, I can't
No.
hear Ken. No.
Well, Peter, Ken, you could put it in the chat, and if you have an audio issue, no worries, and Peter can follow up. I can follow up as well.
Yeah, and I can actually make some of these notes available and send them to you, News, if you like, to share with
Yes,
the
that's
group.
that's another thing I wanted to say. So
Yeah.
everybody on the call, we're going to have some handouts at the end of this, not just talking about the high level about clinical trials, but also the specific processes that Massive Bio takes folks through.
Yeah,
So
and I'm going to also ask them whether it's not, if I can send out their big document on the clinical trial. I don't want to send anything else for proprietary
right.
information, but that might be helpful, for everyone to understand, like, everything you go through. But, and can answer your question. So my primary oncologist here, a Florida cancer specialist I'm in Claremont, Florida. Um, they're the ones that originally referred me to Moffitt for my first CAR T. So basically, and this worked out well to my advantage, that my local doctor here worked with Dr. Boz at Cleveland Clinic, so they know each other. So that's another, comforting factor that, my doctor here, Dr. Al, will pick up the phone and say, hey, buddy, I got Peter in my office. Here's what's going on, and that they're actually communicating. I've always wondered, whether doctors really do communicate with each other.
Hmm.
In this case, I know that they really did. So yes, so my original oncologist put me in contact with Moffitt, and since I had a CAR T there before, I was under primary care there as well as with my local oncologist, Ken.
Excellent,
Um,
excellent.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Fortunately, many patients are referred to clinical trials from their primary treating physicians. There are those patients that come directly to us or Polygon Health, um, that their doctor has told them, we don't have anything here for you in terms of clinical trials, so you can go look for clinical trials. Um, or patients, their doctors are not even talking about clinical trials. So they say, hey, let me look into it and see if there's anything out there. Either way, um, I think it's a good option to be informed, to know what's out there. And whether you're coming through your treating oncologist or independently just searching trials, there are trials out there, and we're happy to help, navigate those trials for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what's important there, Fiona, also is to understand that all of these centers of excellence are research centers too.
Right,
So the
right.
amount of research that they know, it's like, holy crap. It's like I just came back from a conference in Hawaii. I just came back from a conference in Chicago. I just came back from one over in Atlanta. They are always getting together, to gather knowledge that helps the patient out there. And it's just amazing, like, holy crap, these guys really are experts of multiple myeloma. And this
Yeah.
is what they live and
Mhm.
breathe every single day. Just like if it was with lymphoma or any other kind of cancer out there, they are really experts in what they do. And, they're publishing, they're doing research. They've got just wickedly smart staff working for them out there. So it's really important, to your point, that there's just a knowledge base out there that all you have to do is ask. But you have to be your own advocate and
You
ask
do.
your questions out there. You've got to be able to, understand that where do I go? Like for Polygon, right? So now that Polygon has, a whole bunch of tools in place, right? For looking for clinical trials, for looking for other members out there, and maybe connecting with other members out there and sharing your experience. Those things are really, really critical, and important because, like, oh, I never thought about doing that. And then all of a sudden they're on the phone with Fiona and you're finding them a clinical trial and you've got them involved in something and you're helping basically save their life, which is really, we as a community, we thank you guys for doing that.
Amazing. That's a great way to wrap. And if you join the call, thank you so much. Please click on that link that's in the chat, just to see if you're eligible or what clinical trial is near you, a good fit for you. Fiona and her team will really handle you with great care. And of course, Peter, thank you for your honesty, your heart, and reminding us, what patient courage really looks like. Please, we'll be, sending follow-up handouts to this, but join us over at Patient Connect and the Warriors Group, where thousands of myeloma patients are finding the support, the knowledge, and just pushing for more empowerment and better options together. So until next time, let's stay strong, let's stay connected, and keep fighting forward.
Thanks,
Appreciate you all. Thank
everyone.
you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye now.
Thank you.